Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am, and everyone. We warmly welcome you to the 13th lecture of the DLA Trial Advocacy course. Today, we are honored to host Advocate Nabia Nasir, an accomplished legal professional and a proud University of London alumna, 2023. Since completing her legal education, she has been actively practicing in diverse areas, including commercial, corporate, family, and wills and estate laws. Beyond her practice, Ms. Nabia has made remarkable contribution to legal research and education, teaching law students, professional, and the general public on critical and evolving subjects such as artificial intelligence, women's rights, minorities' rights, media, academia, and journalism. In this lecture, she will be sharing her valuable insight on the topic media laws. We will also be having a question answer session at the end of the lecture. And now we are looking forward to an insightful session with ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's my first time giving a talk with the Dynamic Law Association. Our colleague gave me a really nice introduction, so thank you for that. I'm very pleased to be able to give this talk today. Excuse me. So our lecture today is on media and the law in Pakistan, the regulation of the press and media, and how that affects our societal as well as legal fabric today. Um, and so I thought that this lecture is quite relevant, quite topical for today because we have a bunch of there are a lot of there's a lot of discourse nowadays regarding what our media and our press looks like, what our freedom of the press looks like, what it should look like, and this sort of discourse is relevant not just today, but also excuse me, not just in our country, but also everywhere. It's becoming really more and more relevant. So excuse me while I just put some notes aside and alrighty. So I am sharing my screen at the moment. Uh, or actually, let me just do that right here. Yes, okay. Please let me know if you can see the screen. I'm trying to just, excuse me, excuse me. I am just trying to exit the full screen. All right. Can everybody see my screen and my presentation?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, great. There's a green lady and there's all right, great. Wonderful. I'm going to put on my presentation right now. Do excuse me. All right. All right. Here's our presentation for today on, and excuse me, last time I gave this talk for the Pakistan Justice and Rights Initiative, which I am a part of. I am their associate director for the Pakistan Justice and Rights Initiative. And so I gave this talk for them the last time around. So excuse the logos. But anyway, the first thing to know when it comes to media and the law in Pakistan is having a general overview as to what that is. So the presentation's purpose today is going to provide an overview as to one, how the media is regulated in Pakistan, two, the legal framework governing freedom of expression, and three, the ongoing sort of tension, you can say, between freedom of the press or media and state control. So given this overview, given this overall presentation, it's important to recognize these three questions, which are one, how is the media legally regulated in Pakistan? Two, what are the tensions between freedom and control? How do we balance the two in Pakistan? And three, it is also relevant and important to know, how does Pakistan compare globally? It's not just our country that is grappling this issue of freedom of speech, press, association, political opinion, and the like, as well as state control and regulation. It's not just us. It really is becoming a global phenomenon. Also, there are people entering the waiting room, and I'm not so sure who's in charge of letting them in. But if I'm able to let them in, I think I will. Anyway. All right, so the first thing to know about the freedom of expression, or in fact, freedom of expression is the first thing to know when it comes to the media in Pakistan, because the media and the press, they practice and relay this and convey this message of the freedom of expression. So freedom of expression is the first thing to know about when it comes to media and the law in Pakistan. So we're going to talk about freedom of expression and its legal and regulatory framework in Pakistan. The main provision I would like you guys to keep in mind is Article 19 of the 1973 Constitution, which guarantees free speech except as subject to reasonable restrictions, so to speak, on national security, morality, religion, public order, and defamation. So as we will be talking about later on, as in throughout this presentation, throughout this talk, what counts as a reasonable restriction, who is in charge of deciding what is a reasonable restriction and what isn't, that's quite controversial in Pakistan, and it really is the topic of a lot of legal and political discourse as we're having today. Besides the Constitution, there are certain bodies and acts that also regulate media and the press. For example, PEMRA regulates electronic media, and the PICA 2016 has codified cybercrime online content law. If you ask me as a Pakistani, I would say that it's a big step forward, although the 2025 amendment to the PICA 2016 is a little bit problematic, as we will get into it later on in this talk. But it is a good thing that Pakistan has been one of the first countries to really codify cybercrime online content law, because the internet, at least for our generation, has been around for as long as we've been alive. I'm talking about Gen Z generation. हालांकि जो millennials होंगे या those senior to us, they may be even more familiar with the internet because they saw it come into fruition, right? But we've always known it. And so I think it really reflects how important the internet is in our legal framework, in our social framework, by codifying it into law, especially cybercrime, because Pakistan and Pakistanis are especially susceptible to cybercrime. And lastly, the Press Council is the watchdog for print media and ethics. So sort of when it comes to censorship or violation of guidelines, that sort of thing, the Press Council is in charge of being the watchdog for such violations. So to give you more of a more in-depth look at the legal framework, I want to talk a little bit more about Article 19 of the Constitution. Article 19 cites Islamic injunctions marking a stark difference between expressing one's opinion or difference of which and invoking societal discord. So this case, PLR 2024 FSC 1, it made it clear that basically all have the right to, as long as societal discord is not, jeopardized, or societal discord is not, not jeopardized. We want it to be jeopardized. As long as societal discord is not a threat or is not a possibility, one can express one's opinion or difference of which. And in fact, in this case, it was considered a very Islamic thing to do, which is to question authority, question and even challenge authority, and to make sure that you are not just blindly following the law, but that you understand it. Because as citizens of Pakistan, as citizens of any jurisdiction, we owe ourselves the understanding of masalan, what we are being charged with if we're being convicted of a crime, what the consequences what the consequences of those are, what it is that the law is trying to say to us, who it is that the law is trying to address. We as citizens not only have the right, but if we're talking Islamically, which of course the Constitution is influenced by, we have the duty to do so. In any case, It stipulates that all have the freedom to express their opinions and ideas, and that there shall be freedom of the press, albeit subject to the aforementioned restrictions, national security, morality, religion, public order, and defamation. See, so placed therein for the purposes of upholding societal peace and morality, as well as national security and other policy reasons. Now, again, these policy reasons and what it means to uphold societal peace and morality can get. If you ask me, when we're upholding peace for the majority, there's always going to be a minority for whom peace has been jeopardized, right? So, and then what counts as a national security threat? Yesterday, I'm living in Canada right now. Yesterday, I visited the Parliament building, and there was an exhibition from it was called Silenced Turkey. Okay? And their art exhibition was talking about how normal families had been stripped from the Turkish government for treason. Normal families who had left Turkey to pursue their aspirations elsewhere, like in Canada, for example, and had spoken not against necessarily the government, but for the betterment of the country, they had been called national security threats. So we have a kind of a similar problem in Pakistan. Almost anybody can be called a national security threat for really nothing. It's a bit of a touchy subject, so I won't get into it too much, but I'm telling you this so that you understand that it's not just the law that we have to keep into consideration. It's application. It's not just its application, it's also who gets to be in charge of its application that is important when it comes to our legal and societal framework, especially as it pertains to the freedom of the press and the media. The freedom of the press and the media is paramount. It is very important because they convey to us news. A lot of us, Pakistan, more than half of us are illiterate, more than half, and almost all of us have phones, but that doesn't mean that we're modern or literate or educated. We rely on television, we rely on the newspaper, we rely on even hearsay, not hearsay, but like literal hearsay. So like in our communities, in our neighborhoods, relaying news, oral tradition, if you will. So it's really important that we're able to do that as Pakistanis. It's almost a cultural quirk of ours that we don't rely so much on our own research. We do it based on authorized persons that are able to exercise their rights and can convey information to us so that we may relate to the rest of our community fairly and impartially and accurately. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. Let's go on to talking about PEMRA, PICA 2016, and the Press Council. So, the Pakistan Electronic Media Regulatory Authority is responsible for regulating and issuing channel licenses for the mass industry in Pakistan. Its primary roles including regulating broadcast media, improving information and education standards, issuing licenses, promoting accountability, and producing as well as verifying and validifying cultural and religious content. So PEMRA works with national channels like PTV, for example, and make sure that what it is producing and what it's conveying, what it's broadcasting, is not only morally sound, but also is educational, is informational, is accurate. And so, in doing so, PEMRA is responsible for issuing licenses to the right people, to the people and the organizations that PEMRA believes should be able to voice its opinions on television. The PICA 2016, also known as the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, provides guidance on investigating and prosecuting A, cyber harassment, B, cybercrime, identity theft, and hate speech. Again, in Pakistan, statistics will show you that we are incredibly susceptible to online harassment, cybercrime, fraud, embezzlement, theft, identity theft, and hate speech. Because Pakistan is one of the least, we are one of the most regulated countries in terms of using the internet, but one of the least regulated countries in terms of how to use the internet, what it is we're able to say on the internet. A lot of our, like a lot of, and I'm sure you, let's not act brand new here. We've seen कि Instagram, social media पे लोग इंग्लिश वर्ड्स के साथ यानी रोमनाइजेशन के साथ वो उर्दू के अल्फाज यूज करेंगे जो बहुत ही यानी नहायत नामुनासिब है, जो बहुत ही अगली किस्म के अल्फाज हैं. They're very disgusting slurs and stuff, and they're they're sexist and misogynistic, or they're against minority religions, or they're against or minority orientations or transgender folk, for example, and they're able to get away with it because they're writing them in English. Like, and these are Urdu words, and so the algorithm doesn't figure out कि ये है क्या, like what are they trying to say. So Pakistani media, the Pakistani government's way to counter this issue is just flat out making a blackout of the internet, which frankly, if you ask me, ye bhi namunasib hai. That doesn't really help solve the issue at the root. And so I think it's very important that Pakistan reflects its own situation by enacting the peak of 2016. Lastly, I want to talk to you about the Press Council. It maintains freedom of speech and press and expression for journalists, newspapers, and agencies, and has 17 points of ethical practice that its board refers to redress violations of the freedom of the press. Now, the Press Council is important because it actually makes sure, even though it is a government body, it makes sure that it's not working against the government, but it's not working against journalists and press and media professionals either. In fact, a lot of the time, it will contest the rest of the government and say, well, no, this journalist has the right to be able to say what they want to say, to be able to relay accurate, impartial news at the very least, and not be called a treasonist or a terrorist, God forbid, for that sort of thing. So, speaking of which, I want to talk to you about why media in the law, why media laws and the laws protection of the freedom of media, press, and the freedom of speech and political opinion. Why is that so important? Mostly it's important because it's so jeopardized in Pakistan. Pakistan may hamara situation honestly quite dire. So there's a lot of censorship in practice. TV channels become suspended. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter blackouts become very common during protests. We all know about this. हमने memes भी देखी हुई हैं कि जब भी कोई protest होता है, जब भी कोई demonstration होता है, तो it almost seems like some shark comes out of nowhere and starts biting the fiber optic cables in the ocean. But we know that that's not the case. If only it was that simple. A lot of the time, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and other social media are completely blacked out during protests so that information is not relayed to us in real time, because it's sort of it's a sort of a tangent off of justice delayed is justice denied, and frankly, information delayed is information denied too. Online news outlets and social media become blocked, TikTok and YouTube especially, because they're a lot more easily available to us. Not everybody has a Facebook or Twitter account. Not everybody has Reddit, for example, or Discord or whatever. Like, a lot of people have access to YouTube and TikTok. Frankly, you don't need an account to be able to access YouTube. I'm sure कि आप लोग Daily Motion याद कर सकते हैं. I'm sure कि you guys might remember Daily Motion. Now YouTube is like, we are able to use YouTube in Pakistan now. Dailymotion is really not, or like Vimeo is not a thing we use anymore. Lekin it used to be, and the fear is that we might go back to our Dailymotion days. Now, pressure on journalists. This is incredibly important because it's not just what the media or what media professionals are able to say and what they're able to share, but also their lives become in danger, their livelihoods, their enfranchisement, the livelihoods of their families, very unduly so. They become, and honestly, legally unjustifiably so, their lives become toyed with. arbitrary arrests and harassment, for example, that of Matiullah Jan, who was accused of terrorism and charged on bogus charges, convicted on bogus charges of drug possession and what have you, because he's not the, let's just say he's not the biggest fan of the military. And not only that, but the National Union of Journalists, for example, authorities litigating against journalists. So it this is important to us as lawyers क्योंकि हम जानते हैं कि जो floodgates हैं of the Supreme Court of Pakistan as well as our provincial high courts, they are क्या कहते हैं infamous for being backed up. Floodgates जो हैं, they are very barely hanging on by a thread. जो litigative floodgates हैं, क्योंकि we are constantly, excuse me, my nose. We are constantly being bombarded. The courts are constantly bombarded by arbitrary litigation, arbitrary charges, arbitrary cases that are pending. So and a lot of the time when authorities litigate against journalists like this, they know that at the very least, this will be a headache for the journalists and the NUJ, National Union of Journalists, for years and years and years to come. A journalist खुद ही पीछे हटेंगे and कहेंगे कि whatever, fine, I won't say this. I won't relay this news. I won't speak to this politician. I won't support this party. And that leads me to my third point, self-censorship in media houses. A lot of the time, media houses and news agencies, they understand कि if we, and which is really a little bit heartbreaking for me क्योंकि वो जानते हैं जो media professionals हैं उनको इल्म है इस बात का कि हम अगर कोई बात कहेंगे अगर हम किसी if we even if we want to remain impartial, if we relay certain information, we are going to be censored, we are going to be litigated against, we might even be harassed or arrested. So news agencies undermine their own legitimacy in a way. They undermine their own credibility and their own impartiality by self-censoring because it's sort of a preemptive measure against the government censoring you. Just to say, would you rather hold yourself accountable or would you rather have the government hold you accountable? What do you think would be better for you, right? तो इसलिए media houses अपने आप को ही censor कर देते होते हैं अक्सर. Now, let's get back to the law. What is the role of the judiciary and the legislature here? Now, in a nutshell, the judiciary is known for being quite wishy-washy on the subject. इसका मतलब क्या है? It's frustrating that the judiciary is sort of wishy-washy का मतलब इस context में होना ये इसको कहते हैं कि the judiciary sometimes will rule in favor of a journalist or a media professional, for example, or a lot of the time, based on very similar facts, they will undermine their own precedents and rule against them in opposition to them and in favor of the government. So this is really frustrating because the judiciary conflicts two judicial maxims, yani principles. एक, predictability and certainty or precedent, which is very important, and two, flexibility and review. So this, I would argue, is being abused because while we don't want our courts to be so strict and stringent कि वो predictability or certainty को या precedent का मतलब इस तरह से लेके भी nothing can change. Once we make a decision, खासतौर पर the Supreme Court, once the Supreme Court makes a decision, they will not review it or judicial review नहीं हो सकता या flexibility नहीं हो सकती या वो अपने आप को यानी वो overrule नहीं कर सकते अपने rulings को. Now, we don't want that. Lekin my argument to you is that flexibility and review ke guise mein, yani under the guise of flexibility and review, precedents that are good precedents in the view of many legal professionals are being undermined over and over and over again. And so, and also, people who speak out against opposition, people who speak out against the government's what they feel is overregulation of the government or they believe that it's no longer regulation. They believe it's now censorship. They believe it's now oppressive. There is potential for straight up just being held in contempt of the court. Now, कई वजूहात हैं कि you can very easily be held in contempt of the court. या तो एक या तो एक वजह ये हो सकती है कि the court wants to you know get cases moving along quickly क्योंकि like I told you before cases pending हैं and so they want to just get through the issue quickly and just hold whoever has um deeper pockets accountable. या तो deeper pockets या who it is who is easier to say you are being held in contempt of the court, and if you don't want to be held in contempt of the court, then just do as we say, because they have less power to contest the ruling of the court. So there's real potential of being held in contempt of the court for speaking out in opposition. I want to give you a couple of examples. One is that of Rana Muhammad Arshid versus Pakistan of 2020. The Islamabad High Court favored the journalist, ruled that he was being targeted as retaliation for his work, which is the argument that I've been making this whole time. Lekin, the PICA Act of 2025, yani 5 years later only, has made certain amendments that are feared to threaten press freedom, especially its introduction of the Social Media Protection and Regulatory Authority to regulate social media platforms and content. Pakistan is already known for overregulation of platforms and content in social media. So what if there's an entire body to make sure that they're regulating and censoring and and there are also there's the press council as well. There's the arts council as well, for example. There are a lot of public bodies whose job it already is to censor and to regulate. So the PICA Act 2025 making this even more of a priority is quite problematic, at least potentially. Now, I've talked to you a lot about Pakistan internally, but how is it doing on the global stage? How is it doing in terms of its position within the international community? ये भी देखना जरूरी है, ये भी consider करना जरूरी है हमारे लिए. तो I want to talk to you a little bit about, I want to compare Pakistan to the rest of the world with you for a second. Now, let's get this out of the way. Pakistan's doing better than India. Yay. Lekin, that should not be our major indicator as to how well we're doing, because we're still 158 out of 180 countries when it comes to our press freedom. We're very quite low. I believe India might be at 160 and it was at 163 a couple of years ago. So, we're not doing all that much better. ठीक है? I understand कि for us, हमारे लिए ये ज़्यादा ज़रूरी बन जाता है कि what about our immediate neighbors? China में बहुत ही state censorship किया जाता है, excuse me, of media and the press. इंडिया में भी बहुत किया जाता है. तो हमें ये लगता है कि okay, that's great. हम इनकी निस्बत बहुत अच्छा कर रहे हैं. But it's important to know that our immediate neighbors should not be our only threshold for success here. Okay? So, as you can see this chart on the World Press Freedom Index ranking, our score is quite low. Okay? As you can see, our political indicators, all of these numbers, 153, 162, and so on and so forth, excuse me. ये जो numbers हैं, these indicate our position out of 180 countries. So we're really not doing all that great. हमारा national security indicator is at 167 out of 180. हमारा जो legislative indicator है, yes, our legislature is quite active and quite proactive, I would say, still, खास तौर पे हमारे neighbors की निस्बत. So yes, we are doing relatively better. लेकिन I would not consider us doing good unless we are at like 100 and lower, yani 199 and so on. So our Overregulation and censorship of the press and the media has drawn international criticism from the UN Human Rights Council, Amnesty International, and the Human Rights Watch. What do these authorities say? Now, देखिए, मैं भी मानती हूँ कि ये जो councils हैं, Amnesty हो गया, Human Rights Watch हो गया, they're quite Eurocentric, ठीक है? The Western view of human rights a lot of the time is कि भाई अगर आप हमारी तरह नहीं रहते तो आप human rights के खिलाफ हैं यानी यानी बकायदा आप खिलाफ हैं human rights और हकूक के लेकिन that's not the case लेकिन that being said at the same time there is a lot of merit to what the Human Rights Council is saying as well as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the Human Rights Council of the UN. They concluded on Friday, 18th of October 2024, its consideration of the second periodic report of Pakistan on how it implements the provisions of the ICCPR, with committee experts expressing satisfaction of the A grading of the National Commission for Human Rights and raising issues concerning, and this is the important part, attacks on journalists and religious minorities. So Pakistan is known internationally. It becomes even more alarming when our issues do not remain our own. It's sort of like our dirty laundry being just out and about for every guest to see. It's the fact that our attacks on journalists and religious minorities have become now widespread and known in the international community. One committee expert of the Human Rights Council said that threats, disappearances, and killings of journalists were widespread, fueling a climate of self-censorship. Again, जिस तरह से हमने पहले जिक्र किया था इस बात का कि when the government overregulates, when the government self-censors at everything, it becomes almost imperative for us to censor ourselves so that we may escape or evade censorship by the government. Now, there was near total impunity, yani immunity, for violations against journalists. What prosecutions had been issued for crimes against journalists, and what measures were in place to address impunity and guarantee remedies for victims and their families, ये अभी तक इस सवाल का जवाब हमें नहीं मिल चुका. Because we don't know what measures there are. We don't really see a lot of measures to address impunity of the government and to guarantee excuse me, remedies for victims and their families, victims of violations against journalists and media professionals. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have also released articles on crackdowns on freedom of expression and journalists. Masalan, Pakistan authorities passed bill with sweeping controls on social media as of 24th of January 2025. And another one in the start of this year, Pakistan new government cracks down on free expression, religious minorities, journalists, political opposition targeted. So it really begs the question, how free are we really? How free is our media really? That being said, more questions for you to keep in mind. Can the state regulate media and expression of opinion without censoring? How far can our government go, really? And should news outlets and media platforms, including social networking sites, any social media, should they be held accountable, or should individuals using them be held accountable? And third, who does unchecked regulation affect the most? Yani, if there's a political issue, if there's a social issue, and those who are directly affected by that given social issue are are regulated the most in terms of their social media, in terms of their social media use, in terms of their opinion on the internet or through traditional media like the news. Though wouldn't that regulation that is goes unchecked by the government, यानी impunity के साथ जो की जाती है government से, who does that affect the most? I would argue that it's the people directly affected by a certain issue. So what do we do? What do we do about our very unstable and quite scary, honestly, situation regarding media and the law and the freedom of media in Pakistan? Now, I have four possible solutions that I've come up with, that I've also observed as a legal professional. Like, and I also have but there are certain problems, and we'll go through them one by one. Now, one thing we can do is that we can introduce new legal reforms, for example, the PICA amendments. Like, are these amendments helpful or harmful, and who are they really serving? Second, digital media evolution in Pakistan. Grassroots movements can be great, but what about bad apples? Again, masalan, if we talk about the if we talk about a certain social issue in Pakistan that is being promulgated, whose supporters' rights are being promulgated via social media, Instagram, for example, these grassroots movements are amazing. They're really great, and they help to mobilize real dialogue and change. Like in Bad Apple Se Murad, I mean those few people who are in it for their own purposes, who wish to undermine the movement, or who even mean well, but they may just not be very informed. Okay? So what do we do about those? Do we dismiss the entire movement or not? Uh, excuse me, I think is my screen still being shared?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am, it is visible.
already great. One second here. All right. And third, let's talk about the role of civil society as a whole. Can the Pakistani public drive meaningful change if more than half of us don't use or understand the internet? We know that strength comes in numbers. Lekin, what if those numbers aren't very well informed? We need to be able to make sure that our numbers are, yani, numbers of people are not only a lot, but that they're also that they understand what it is they're fighting for. ठीक है? क्योंकि वरना पाकिस्तान में हमने देखा हुआ कि mob mentality बहुत ज़ाहिर है, बहुत वाज़ेह है. It's very quite common in Pakistan for a lot of people to support causes that they just don't understand. And fourth, international pressure. Pakistan keeps being pressured by the international community, but what will it do about it, and what is it doing about it currently? Pakistan doesn't seem to be doing much. That being said, I would I would invite all of us to make sure that we as legal professionals and as professionals in political sciences, in the legislature, in policy, in human rights and social work, in the media and in journalism especially, and in the press, we make sure that we're constantly asking these questions, but हमारे लिए सिर्फ discourse and discussions काफी नहीं है. We have to make sure that we're really mobilizing real change, that we're working with the government in tandem with them and making sure that we're making it clear that we're not against the country or even the government, but we are against its over censorship, its over regulation of not just us lay people that are not media professionals, but especially our media professionals. Thank you. I'm open to now I believe this might be the question and answer uh excuse me segment. So our colleague Khushbakht has also said, okay, kindly write your questions and queries here related to the topic, or if the DLA is okay with it, you guys can go ahead and raise your hands, and I will do my best to answer each and every question. We have about it's 10:37 where I am right now. I believe it's 7:37. So we have until 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Pakistan time to get these questions answered, inshallah. So do excuse me if I'm not able to by the time the meeting is over. Thanks. All right. Areej asks a really nice question. What's the difference between fair criticism and hate speech? Now, any reasonable person will be able to tell you that it's sort of a you'll know it when you see it situation. Hate speech is usually unduly offensive. Yani, masalan, if I have a criticism against, let's say, the Catholic Church, okay, and I say and this is kind of a weird example, like, and it is very relevant. We know about the sexual abuse that is very prevalent within the Catholic Church. Now, that would be fair criticism. But if I start bashing Catholics, Roman Catholics, and I say something like, all of you are pedophiles. Every single Catholic is a pedophile. Every single Catholic is a weird pervert, and they support the Vatican and what the popes are doing, what the Pope is doing, and they support blah blah blah. That would be hate speech because it is unjustifiably offensive. देखिए unjustifiably offensive का मतलब ये होता है कि you are offending someone in a way that you cannot blame on them. यानी आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि ये बंदा ये शख्स ज्यादा sensitive है क्योंकि in law we also know that there's something called the eggshell skull rule. Okay, you take your victims as you see them, right? You can't blame them for being too weak or too sensitive or too triggered or that sort of thing. So I would say that as per my experience, as per my knowledge, the difference between fair criticism and hate speech is that hate speech is less about criticism and it's more about just being offensive. It's more about just it's in the name. It's really in the name. It's based on hatred and really not अगर criticism उसका basis होता भी है, which a lot of the time it's not. लेकिन अगर होता भी है, hate speech is different from fair criticism in that it is unduly offensive. Yani offensive for really no reason. I hope that answers your question. Thank you though. That's a good question. Also, you can, like I said before, you can write your questions down in the chat. We have about 20 minutes left. Yeah, and I'm gonna demonstrate for those that might not be uh,
Ma'am, there is
familiar.
a question from one of the participants, and that is like online on YouTube. They are asking this question. So I'm
Okay,
asking you here:
okay.
should government regulate media in the name of patriotism?
Hmm. Well, the government certainly has done that, and they can keep doing that. Like in lay people and media professionals and professionals in other fields will also say कि भाई हम भी patriotism की वजह से criticize कर रहे हैं, right? हम भी patriotism के लिए हम we are expressing a certain political opinion or we are relaying certain news. So to answer your question, yes, the government can and the government does censor and regulate based on this reason of patriotism. But um, but we can also argue patriotism.
Okay, ma'am, that's great. Ma'am, there is another question from
Yeah.
one of the participant, and she's asking that how to keep right of freedom of speech and expression and careful by PEMRA and current media laws.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that for me?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'm slowly doing it. How
Thank
to
you.
keep how to keep right of freedom of speech and expression and careful by PEMRA and current media laws. Should I write it
No,
or
no, no, I understood. Thank you.
okay? Okay.
So this question is basically asking us about policy, right? How to regulate, how to legislate policy in a way that it serves all of us. How are we able to, and this is an ongoing subject, right? That's my argument is कि it's up to us to have the ideas, but it's up to the legislature and the government to be able to actually enforce them. If these if our higher courts can enforce freedom of expression and rights and through the PEMRA, through addressing amendments to the PICA 2016 जो 2025 में आ चुकी हैं, that would help us to regulate more. So it's to answer your question, it's not just about us individual parties, but it's really up to our higher officials to make sure that we are like protecting rights and freedom of speech. What lay people can do, what you and I can do, is we can advocate for that. But that frankly, it won't have much of an effect unless it's written into writing, like set into stone. You are able to have this sort of right, and that the government enforces and implements that right fairly. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. There's another question asked by Arid in our chat. Are private are pri private are privacy policies on apps and websites legally enforceable? Privacy policies. Are privacy policies on apps and websites legally enforceable? If you're speaking about, I believe they are. Now, if we're talking about constitutional rights, if we're talking about private rights or like freedom of contract, every there is this thing called freedom of contract. When you agree to use a certain app or a certain website or a certain social networking site, you are agreeing to the way they run things. Now, so they are legally enforceable as until and unless the law says, oh, never mind. That's like the simple answer to your question. Thank you. But to give you a little bit more clarification, these privacy policies, it's not like freedom of contract lets you contract whatever. It's not like जो and by freedom of contract इस context में इसका मतलब ये है कि मसलन like the terms of agreement that you agree to and sign on to when you're using an app and website. And they're not allowed to say whatever, but there is a bit more leniency as compared to if the website or app is government run, for example.
Ma'am, there is another question from one of the participants. She is
Sure.
asking that the acts and authorities you mentioned, the PICA and PEMRA, are they really helpful? I mean, are they even working in favor of us? There are examples of immoral and harmful content, but these are no helpful.
Yeah, my argument throughout this presentation has been कि it's a good thing that they exist. अगर वो ना होते, अगर वो मौजूद ही ना होते, तो we would have no basis for legal advocacy. We would not even be able to create a certain argument. Masalan, if I'm being harassed online, I wouldn't even have a legal standing. I would, if Instagram, for example, says, well, yeah, as of today, you're allowed to be harassed online. In fact, we don't even consider this harassment. Then I can't go to the government and say, well, no, I actually am being harassed. So it's a good thing that law exists. The issue is, as you said in your question, is it being enacted well? My argument will always be कि जब तक 100% perfect ना किया जाता है, and you might think isn't that a little bit unrealistic? Frankly, I don't think so. Unless 100% तक हमारे rights and protections नहीं महफूज की जाते, I don't think that it's working as well as it can or as well as it should. In fact, I think that it's quite problematic कि इनके मौजूद होने के बावजूद हमारे हकूकी जो हमारे जो हकूक हैं, they're not really protected as much as they can be. I hope that answers your question. Somebody asked a question about the difference between PEMRA and PICA. I do believe that they deleted it, but just to clarify, PEMRA is a body. It's not a law. PICA is the law. PEMRA law at the time applies the law, or it helps to interpret it, that sort of thing.
Okay, ma'am, we are just done with the question answer session, and we are about to end the session here as we extend our sincere gratitude to you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable insights on media laws And your
Thank you.
knowledge, experience, and passion for legal education have truly enriched today's session. And we appreciate everyone's presence and hope this lecture inspires continued learning and meaningful discussion beyond the classroom for sure. Thank you so much, ma'am, again for having us today and for such a great knowledge sharing and great, uh, yes, bundle of thanks, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Much success to the Dynamic Law Association and to all of our colleagues here today. I think it's really important that we talk about issues that are growing ever more um, relevant to us. Because it doesn't you don't have to be thank you, Arij, and to everybody. You don't have to be a professional. You don't even have to be educated to be affected by an issue. Being educated does not just mean having a formal school education. It means making yourself aware as much as possible as to the world around you. So I believe that if we keep having seminars like this, keep having discussions like this, we can get to that point where all of us, our families, our friends, those of us that may not even always have internet access or media access, all of us can become sufficiently uh, क्या कहते हैं, educated about our rights and about our government. It will help us to become truly, frankly, Pakistani, in the sense that you become a true citizen of your country when you are fully aware of it, when you're fully involved and embedded in your country in all aspects, public life, private life, civic life, political life, all that. And so for that reason, I want to thank everybody for having me. Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah, thank you. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Allah Hafiz, ma'am.